You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
You're tuned in to Fantha Tracks Radio.
This is the Phantom from Down Under.
G'day, mate. How you going?
Star Wars news in a single file.
Coming to you live from Quinlan's Cantina in the Gold Coast of Australia. This is your slice of Australian Star Wars news.
Hosted by the Malt himself, Adam O'Brien.
Alrighty, mate. Let's get into it.
G'day, how you going? This is Adam O'Brien, the Fantha from Down Under, coming to you live from Quinlan's Cantina in the Gold Coast of Australia. In lockdown, that's right, Australia is in lockdown like much of the rest of the world right now with, of course, the COVID-19 crisis that's happening to us, and it's affecting all of us out there. But tonight, I'm going to chat some Star Wars to get your mind off that and get some positivity going out there. Get some good news happening as the Force needs to spread across the planet a force of positivity. That's right. So, how you going out there? How is things? And are you checking out all the latest Star Wars? I'll tell you what, if you're in the UK right now, you're getting the release, finally, of The Mandalorian. And there's no beating around the bush. For me, this is the greatest addition to the Star Wars saga since the prequels, as far as I see it. You know, I really enjoyed the last couple of films. I think they may have gone a little off track here and there as far as gelling together. They felt a little bit jumbled, but as singular films, they were great. But I tell you what, Rogue One really surprised me. Solo, I loved. I mean, Solo was just fantastic. But Mandalorian seems to be just jumping for joy all over those because it's something a bit fresh, a bit familiar, but also a bit new as well. And of course, we have the child in it, of course, and such a unique character, and obviously it's going to lead into the second season. But I'm just glad you listeners out there in the UK are enjoying it. And I'll tell you what, the Fantha team from the UK, with Mark Newbold, and of course the rest of the team, are doing their watch finally on the Disney Plus service over there. So I hope all of you guys and girls are enjoying it over there as well. And enjoying just this different slice of, bounty hunting. It's something that's always been a part of, the original trilogy and in between, obviously in the prequels as well. So many different side stories and much more out there. And I'll tell you what, as we head into some of these great chats about the Legends era, of course known years ago as the expanded universe of Star Wars, we're going to delve into some of those great stories, like the Bounty Hunter trilogy by K.W. Jeddah. And, of course, he was the guy that later took on the Blade Runner universe after the passing, of course, of Philip K. Dick. And he wrote Blade Runner 2 to 4. So this little trilogy that took basically the time of Rick Deckard and pushed it forward. And some of those are actually really a lot of fun and ties together the actual book itself, Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep, and obviously brings together the Blade Runner universe. It kind of tries to bring it to a cohesive part because they're really two separate stories. One is obviously generated by it too. But K.W. Jeddah does a fantastic job in the Bounty Hunter series. I've always enjoyed those too. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, but let's head straight into the news, folks, before we do anything, and talk about a certain amount of casting that's coming from the Variety website. Ever since the 2008 launch of the Clone Wars, particularly the movie, I have been enamored with the character Ahsoka Tano. This Padawan learner to, of course, Anakin Skywalker, really opened up the depth of what Anakin's heroism was, and, we got to see him grow as a person thanks to, her inclusion into the story. And obviously her own story too. She's really one of the most, a real firecracker when it comes to, the potential of where the story would go. And of course we got to see it along with her time in the Jedi, going right up from obviously being a Padawan to really, I think, learning what it meant to, again, sacrifice is key to her story. And amazing, all those seasons right up through to season 5 of Clone Wars and beyond, and now, of course, into the other series of Rebels and vice versa. she's one of the most exciting characters out there, and Ashley Eckstein has always, I think, as much as obviously the writers, Dave Filoni, obviously too, creating the character, along with the team and George's input as well, have always made this one of the most interesting characters too, because we're getting to see, I personally think, it even further and better and deeper journey than Anakin and Obi-Wan's own time as Padawans, because we don't get that much time with them in the feature films. So Ahsoka Tano was really, really interesting, and I never got a lot of the fans sort of. I think fans hated her when she first came in there, because they're like, why would Anakin have a Padawan? It was not so much about the character. It was like, why would they be changing this now? Why? Why? Because it's a bloody good story. That's why. It's a bloody good character. And now we're getting to see the next evolution, and of course that is live action Ahsoka Tano. And this is only, again, something that comes because she's such a beloved character, and obviously everyone, this new next generation, have really looked up to not only what the characters brought to it, but also obviously the voice actor behind it, and of course that is Ashley Eckstein, who obviously created her universe, and really I think gave chance for not just the Star Wars fans of old, but all Star Wars fans across all generations and all age groups to really, whether they're all really getting into what it is to be Star Wars. And it really is about inclusion for everybody. And Ahsoka Tano is just that sort of spark of rebellious sort of spirit, and also a true hero. And that's one of the things, there's no fall to the dark side for Ahsoka, and that's what I love about this character. It's kind of, I think she mirrors a little bit of what Luke and Leia have gone through in the original trilogy, but she really drives her own thread, because she's a far more, I think, experienced, Jedi, and even past being in the Jedi, she's one of the most experienced and interesting characters when it comes to other potentials in and outside the Force. Her time, obviously, in Rebels with, going against, of course, Anakin, now Darth Vader, was even more paramount and even fantastically. I mean, we all loved that just as much as, obviously, the showdown of Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi in Rebels as well. That sort of final, battle. It's the same feel, obviously, seeing, Snips and Sky Guy go at it, and it was tough. Now, the news is that Rosario Dawson has got the role in the second season of Mandalorian, which I'm absolutely pumped about, because Rosario Dawson is one of the most, first of all, huge Star Wars fan, absolutely massive Star Wars fan. She's a huge fan of pop culture. She's a comic book geek. She's into, obviously, a lot of the pop culture that's out there as well. She's a damn good, creative talent herself, an artist, obviously been involved in acting for years, and I just think, is really, really somebody that's going to be interesting in the role. I think physically she's going to be able to pull it off. She's very athletic, strong, and she's got a real spark to her, which I think, Ahsoka Tano has. And I think that's what's going to sort of drive it home as far as getting the role paramount, bang on the nail, really get exactly what Ahsoka's, really, I think, in individual streak. There's a little bit of Qui-Gon Jinn-like sort of a spirit there, I think, with the way that she's always been in the stories and stuff like that too. And that spirit obviously led into, obviously, Anakin as well. There's less so in Obi-Wan, but definitely in those guys as well. But Rosario Dawson, fantastic. And if you want to check out a really good movie to see, I think, a potentially the best role I think she's done is Clerks 2, where she basically plays the restaurant manager of the place where the action takes place. And it's really well played out. Obviously, you get the characters from Clerks 1 and a lot of characters from Kevin Smith's repertoire, pretty much. But what great about it is that you get to see her really own it. I mean, it's an ensemble film and it's comedy, but she really pretty much takes over that film with her fantastic performance in it too. So I'm pumped. I'm really hoping that this is 100% true. Variety, obviously, that or Hollywood Reporter have been the ones to leak a lot of this, great stuff in the past. Not always 100% true, there's obviously, there's, whether it's Disney leaking this, who knows? Or is it just, somebody that's in the know? Well, either way, Rosario Dawson is fantastic, and I hope that this is 100% on the ball, because she's in this film, in this TV series. Tell you what, season 2 could be very, very interesting. So, where can you find Fantha Tracks? Well, I'll tell you what, folks, you can find it at phanthetracks.com, where you can find all your Star Wars news in a single file. It's a great website where we've got everything from reviews to articles on upcoming Star Wars events, movies, TV shows, you name it. It's all up there from a huge range of, obviously, great, talented people from all over the globe, and, of course, headed by our team in the UK as well. So go and check that out. You can catch me, the Fantha from Down Under, on socials at The Lethal Mullet, where you'll find me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, talking all sorts of pop culture, and of course Star Wars being one of those as well. You can catch me also on the Fandom Podcast Network, where I have 2 shows. We have the Lethal Mullet Podcast, which covers everything from the 1980s and beyond when it comes to action movie cinema. Chuck Norris, Arnold Schwarzenegger, even more obscure ones like, of course, Michael Bloody Dudikoff, and of course, the one, the only Chuck Norris. It's all on there, folks. You go and check that out. Also, with fellow Fantha, the one, the only, Mark Newbold, we have a monthly show there called Making Treks. That's right. It's kind of the sister podcast to Making Tracks. And this is all about Star Trek. We deep dive into the classic Star Trek episodes from all the way back in the original series right through to Star Trek Picard and beyond. We look at what makes the previous stories so strong, and of course right through to the new ones, and what Jean-Luc Picard is facing now without his cup of tea. So go check that out, folks, too. But main thing is, check out, of course, Fantha Tracks for all your Star Wars news in a single file. Alright, time to get to the meat and potatoes, folks, here on the Fantha from Down Under. We're going to look at something that was asked to me by one of our listeners. What would George Lucas have done had he retained, still to this day, Lucasfilm, and made into, obviously, his own sequel trilogy? Well, we know a few things. We know, obviously, some work was done with the Michael Arndt script on Episode 7, before it was called, obviously, The Force Awakens. But we have kind of a little bit of insight, and it's thanks to James Cameron. Now, he was putting together a series and also put out, through AMC, a book about that series too, and it's called James Cameron's Story of Science Fiction. This is a book you can find with Guillermo del Toro, Christopher Nolan, Arnold Schwarzenegger, no, Ridley Scott, and of course Steven Spielberg. What's great about it is they talk about their influences of what made science fiction powerful for them, and obviously, you know, what influenced them to want to make science fiction in, obviously, film. And obviously they're the big guns when it comes to science fiction in film. So what was interesting is George talked about some of the influences of Star Wars in that interview that he has with George Lucas. And, you know, if you haven't seen this series, it's very interesting, as a Star Wars fan, to really see, again, the great maker himself, George, you know, where his mind was at with, obviously, the first 2 trilogies and where he would have gone further.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you are following Fantha Tracks.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because knowing George, he gets deep. He gets a bit cerebral at times when it comes to the Force and, of course, the lore of Star Wars. So what's interesting is he was going to get macroscopic, I think he's... Hopefully that's kind of the word. I think it was microscopic. Now, in its nutshell, what he's really talking about in this interview is, gets down to, of course, midi-chlorians. And he really talks about mitochondria And in George's own quote here, he says, midichlorians are mitochondria. So what he's talking about here, and why he's gone into the scientific sort of realm here, and bringing mythology into it. Okay, so bringing the idea of myth as well as science there is the fact that it is something about here that we on Earth have to have a balance, and that balance is simple. What you do here affects others. What they do affects you. What one animal does to another affects another. And there's a balance there. There's a ripple effect. There's a domino effect. And so, it's about living in balance, living in harmony for, again, mutually beneficial, as they say in episode 1. It's one of the smartest things about what the Phantom Menace was all about. And of course, people completely missed that, particularly Naboo. Naboo is designed to really push the concept of the Force. So one of those classic ideas is, of course, that, you look at the midichlorians that people miss, is that the Force itself is, basically a metaphor for that exact thing, is the fact that, what we do and the connection that we have to those around us, obviously has that ripple effect, but it also has that ripple effect back. So, again, it's a balance. The Force is literally a communication, if you like, between those two. And of course, what the other part of that is that we are part of a bigger picture. So part of what he was going to do in his proposed sequel trilogy was explore that, and explore the idea that bacteria and mitochondria of that sort are just as powerful as larger, obviously physical elements out there in the universe. So again, it's going back to almost the Ewoks versus the Empire. It's the underdog story, but also living in balance. And again, it would have been, I think, a real head trip to see that sort of a story out there, and of course, really push the Force. I mean, we haven't seen that probably since the bonus missions, the Clone Wars, where obviously Yoda first goes to Dagobah and obviously gets trained in the way to tap into the cosmic force by Qui-Gon Jinn's spirit. And of course, part of that is learning, this unifying sort of, life. Life is one big picture. We're a tiny little, corner of that, a tiny little kernel of that. And that's what this is all about. So it's interesting. Again, George is a lot more scientific in nature to his own stories. I think that's one of the things that Disney have, with obviously their ownership now of Lucasfilm, steered away from a little, but it's still there. You watch a lot of that sort of stuff, you're seeing the little kernels coming through. Even in The Last Jedi, we get a little bit of that, the way that Luke is training Rey and giving her that sort of idea that the Force isn't just, light and dark. It's everything. It's all around you. And that's what it's all about. It's about the communication and having that idea that at the end of the day, balance must be there. And that balance isn't just one-way street. All right? And so what you affect others can also have a ripple effect and come back to you as well. And that is what this is all about. So I think we would have seen, again, something that would have been somewhat like the sequel trilogy that you had out there, but again, I think this would have been a far more cerebral sequel trilogy, and perhaps one very interesting one. All right, folks, it's time again now to go out to you, the listeners out there. And I put a call out a little while ago to see if anyone would want to come on the show and have a bit of a chat about their thoughts on Star Wars. And we have 2 listeners here today to chat just that. So let's go live and get them on the show right now. A gentleman by the name of Charles, who's actually moving out here to Beaconsfield, or as he calls it, Beaconsfield. And he is a long-time Star Wars fan. So we're just going to patch in. Just give me a sec. Here we go. And Charles, are you there?
Oh, hello, Adam. Good day to you, mate. How are you?
I'm doing really well now. Obviously, you've moved out here from the UK. Obviously, Star Wars is made in the UK, so it's such a huge part of obviously the building blocks of what Star Wars is. Did you get to see any of like Pinewood or anything while you were over there? A few years ago.
Not myself, not with my own eyes. I mean, when we talk about pine, I prefer mahogany. It's a bit more keeping, But yes, I enjoy the War of Stars, and there's some good things on there that can keep one occupied.
Now, you are actually a big fan from what you've told us in your email, that you're a big fan of the Ewoks. Now, obviously, some of the great cast in Return of the Jedi, Warwick Davis in particular, big part of that. And obviously he came back in The Rise of Skywalker with his, his own son. So Wicket W. Warwick got a chance to have, a family in this. Now, what do you think of the Ewoks themselves? Should we get another Ewok movie?
Oh, yes, I love the...
And should they maybe be in Coruscant or something like that? Like, go for a bit of a wander?
Oh, I'm sure there's a mate of yours called Adam Harris, and he calls it Coruscant, which I find rather unusual.
Yes, I mean, it's great to see that obviously, that universe is out there. Now, what is it with these frickin' streaming services and obviously even Disney Plus and Star Wars themselves not giving us the rise of frickin' Skywalker early like the United States?
Yes, it's rather peculiar, isn't it, Adam? I mean, it's digital. It's not like they have to send it somewhere. It's just plug it in, press play.
All right, thanks, Charles, for being on the show. And now we're going to patch in with... Oh, who is it? Hang on. Here it goes. All right, final call here, folks, is from... oh, God, look who it is. It's Roadkill. We don't even have an address for Roadkill. Looks like he's in a parking lot in Virginia in the States. Hey, are you at a drive-in today, Roadkill?
Hey, brother. Yeah, I'm here in the good old Virginia, and I'm going to be watching myself some of the Clone Wars.
So you're watching the new... this is the premiere episode of the new Clone Wars season.
I don't know, mate. It's just whatever I can see through this set.
Roadkill, are you there? Roadkill, transmit if you can. We've lost you.
The Obi-Wan Kenobi's. I think he's a real nice man. I'd like to meet him in real life.
And what about Anakin Skywalker?
Anakin of the Skywalker clan. I think he's not too bad, but I hear he goes a bit bad at the end, but we ain't seen that yet.
No, it seems to be maybe after the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking out at something that's near and dear to my heart, and that is, of course, stories that have been either similar to Star Wars or using the classic mythological tropes that we, as people that love great adventure stories, really get into. And one of those is by an author who, at the same time as Star Wars, brought something to the fantasy realm that was very much in keeping with the classic hero's tale, using the hero's journey, and really, I think, is the heir to the great stories of things like, obviously, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and others. That is, of course, Terry Brooks' The Sword of Shannara, or Shannara. But The Sword of Shannara is an interesting series because what's interesting is it came out at a time of a certain big science fiction film, didn't it? That's right, it came out in 1977. And this book obviously is the first in a number of huge amount of books by Terry Brooks in the Shannara universe. And the Shannara universe is still to this day probably one of the most beloved fantasy ones, and obviously had the Shannara Chronicles recently as a TV show. But the series really, in its heart, is very much like Star Wars. It has that classic mythological tone of obviously heroes going through what they need to and sacrifice. It has very much like the Force with magic. So in this universe, you have the Druids, which is just like the Jedi, pretty much. They have a huge lore and huge history as well. But what's interesting about this series in comparison to Star Wars is this one's rooted in our own history. Because Shannara is Earth. And what's interesting about Shannara itself is that that sort of prehistory that they have in series like Star Wars, for example, is really part of what we're doing, in, say, Star Wars as well into, say, Shannara. But Shannara uses the real world as its prehistory and then brings the world of fairy back into life after nuclear weapons have pretty much leveled the entire Earth. And all your ogres, your trolls, all that sort of stuff all come out of that. We have the Ohmsfords in this, who are pretty much I suppose like the Skywalkers, if you like. But there's different families and different characters in this. There's no real through line of those same ones. There's a few here and there, but they are all different generations of the same sort of family. But again, you have the elves, you also have humans, you have all these other characters. There's different races. But the great thing about this is it really is rooted in what is classic to Star Wars.
Hi, Paul Blake here, Greedo from Star Wars A New Hope, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Of course, Terry wrote a Star Wars book as well, because George remembered just, how good the Shannara series was, and of course how close it was to the classic hero's journey. Now, what a lot of people don't realise is back in the days of when Terry was trying to put this series together and, putting out the first book, he was also working with an editor that was working with George. And there's a great interview years ago I read with Terry was doing at the time with Armageddon's Children, which is one of the prequel novels to the Sword of Shannara. And in that interview, he was talking about how George had heard that there was a fantasy series which he may like, and the fact that it was being written at the same time as Star Wars, following the classic hero's journey, and obviously a lot of the motifs that are central to those great adventure stories. And again, I think they've sort of we've had, this is pretty much the Star Wars like feel, but in the world of fairy, or in the world of fantasy. What is great about it too is that this is, I think, a little bit more adult than Tolkien's universe, but also not as adult and gruesome and gory and filled with adult themes as, say, Game of Thrones and that sort of era. This is still, heading towards that sort of tone that Star Wars hits. But Terry does really well, and I really enjoyed his Star Wars novel, The Phantom Menace. Again, when the prequels came out, they had a chance to really expand on what was out there, expand the universe that little bit, and really bring about what was important to, Anakin Skywalker's journey, and, of course, his time on Tatooine and Mos Espa before, of course, joining the larger world and the larger universe out there. It's a great series. I really hope that you check it out, and thanks to our dear friend of the show, Din, who asked me about it. He said, have you heard of this series? And yeah, I'm a big fan. I love it, and I've pretty much got all of the series. My favourite of the books is The Scion of Shannara, which is one of the sequel books set, I think, a whole generation after the Sword of Shannara. So go and check it out, and also definitely check out the series. It's a lot of fun. You have this series that's got some great actors behind it. A lot of Australian talent, a lot of New Zealand talent, and of course some really, let's just say, put it this way, Gimli is involved in this as one of the kings of the elves as well. And it's said about the second book, which is, of course, Elfstones of Shannara. I think the reason they did this was because at the end of the day, the Sword of Shannara is very similar in some ways to, and not exactly the same, but it's very similar to the Lord of the Rings. So that's one of the reasons they, I think, chose Elfstones, because it is a far more original take. One thing that is great about this series too is that now there's all these re-releases of the books as well. So many different versions. The audiobooks are great as well. But look, folks, get out there, check it out. If you want to have a bit of a break from just Star Wars books, you can't find anything more Star Wars like than this when it comes to fantasy. Go and check it out. Terry Brooks, awesome stuff. Yeah, you'll thank me for it, I guarantee it. Well, that's all we have for time tonight here on the show. I hope you've enjoyed our little look at, obviously, Ahsoka Tano. I mean, God, this is the best news we've had in Star Wars in a long while. I think since the news of The Mandalorian. I'm pumped. Can't wait. It's going to be fantastic. Rosario Dawson, you are fantastic. And, of course, to, George Lucas's ideas on, obviously, a sequel trilogy. Who knows? He might one day come out of retirement and do these, offbeat artistic movies that he's always been talking about doing. And of course, go and check out Terry Brooks' work. You've probably read The Phantom Menace, I take it. Probably have. But I tell you what, Sword of Shannara is as close to Star Wars as you're going to get in fantasy. Yeah, you'll find. Go and check it out. I'm Adam O'Brien, the Fantha from Down Under. We'll catch you next time on, of course, FanthaTracks.com. It's the Fantha from Down Under. From here in Australia, it's Quinlan's Canteen on the Gold Coast. Tell you what, we'll catch you next time. May the Force be with you.